It's over 3,000 years since King David made his heroic conquest of Jerusalem and transformed it into one of the most popular cities in history. Although King David is long gone and Jews no longer practice monarchy, Jerusalem is still standing. Its walls and underground caves hold mysteries regarding the reign and death of ancient Israel's royal families. Recently, archaeologists struck gold when they visited the city of David, leading them to tick one mystery off their bucket list. They finally stumbled on an important relic of the Jewish monarchy that shines a light on one of the Jews' famous ancestors. What is this relic, and what does it prove or disprove about King David? What can we learn about his life, reign, and death? Join us as we answer these questions in today's video. We have heard of legends and read stories of great men who once walked the earth. However, only a few come close to or match the popularity of King David, the second ruler of ancient Israel. Although it's been thousands of years since his demise, it is hard to forget him because of his numerous exploits. The story of King David, if filmed as a Hollywood movie, would be a box office blockbuster because of its intrigues. His story is riddled with excitement and twists that would hold the attention of any audience. The legendary David was a shepherd boy who later became the sovereign of Israel. According to the biblical account, David was the 8th son of Jesse from Bethlehem. He entered into national limelight in Israel after he killed Goliath, the champion of the Philistines, a nearby rival nation. David would go on to become the king of Israel after the death of King Saul, who had been after his life. He went on to conquer the city of Jerusalem and made it the capital of Israel. David achieved several military successes during his reign, expanding the realms of his kingdom. He is arguably the most famous king in Israel's history and is often regarded as the perfect king. Furthermore, he is honored as the forefather of the Hebrew Messiah, Jesus Christ. He handed the kingdom over to his son Solomon just before dying at the age of 70. As with most historical figures, archaeologists have been fascinated by the prospect of discovering David's tomb. However, this discovery has been one hard nut to crack due to the period that David lived on earth. From what historians tell us, David reigned in the 9th century, so it is no surprise that archaeologists haven't found it easy to uncover the location of his tomb. Another hiccup in uncovering this ancient tomb is that many people doubt the genuineness of David's story. For centuries, skeptics have argued that King David is just a legend and didn't walk the face of the earth as biblical accounts would have us believe. However, this narrative has been punctured and is gradually fizzling out with the emergence of archaeological evidence that supports his existence. The historical text was not enough to convince the naysayers that the story of King David was real and not some tale the Jews cooked up to deceive the world. Hence, archaeologists had to come up with evidence that couldn't be refuted, and they needed to do this fast. Fortune finally smiled on archaeologists in August 1868 when they stumbled on an unusual find in the land of Moab, which is present-day Jordan. This famous discovery made the news in the scientific community because it was a discovery like no other. This peculiar find is known as the Stele of Mesha or Mesha Stele. The discovery of the Mesha Stele by Frederick Augustus Klein, an Anglican mission, reignited conversations about the authenticity of King David's reign in the history books. Klein discovered the stele intact at the site of ancient Dibon, now known as Dibon in Jordan. When it was given to archaeologists to examine, they found shocking information. The stele, which became known as Moab Stone, is the first major epigraphic Canaanite inscription found in southern Levant. It is also the longest Iron Age inscription ever found in the region. Besides being a major piece of evidence of the Moabite language, the stone transports us back in time to the reign of King Mesha of Moab. Through the stele, we look into the life of the Moabite king and what transpired during his reign in the 9th century. What excited archaeologists about this find was the fact that they could draw parallels between the story of the stele and biblical accounts, specifically in the Bible's Book of Kings. This historical stone walks us through the steamy waters of the political relationship between Moab and Israel, and we owe it all to King Mesha, who had the stele inscribed and constructed in the first place. From the inscription, we learn about King Mesha's military exploits. Moab had been subjected to Israel's reign and paid them tribute. However, under Mesha's rule, Moab rebelled against Israel. The revolt was a successful one. Afterward, Mesha began to make major military campaigns that transformed Moab into a regional power. The highlight of the story told by the stele is when it mentions the House of David, confirming the existence of a Davidic dynasty at the time that Mesha made this stele. The Israel that David had left behind had been divided into two states, northern Israel and Judah. Judah, whose capital was Jerusalem was being ruled by the House of David, descendants of the Jewish king. According to Mesha's account, it was northern Israel that he revolted against. The excitement generated by the discovery of this Iron Age artifact had barely settled when archaeologists uncovered another spectacular find that attested to King David's reign. The world was still reeling in admiration from the discovery of the Moabite stone when news broke that archaeologists had dug up another stele known as the Tel Dan stele. The Tel Dan stele is unlike every other archaeological reference of the House of David. In fact, when scientists were probed, they confessed that it is the most significant extra-biblical reference that confirms the existence of the House of David. The fragmentary stone holds Canaanite inscriptions from the 9th century. We would have remained in the dark about the existence of this stele, if not for the adventurous efforts of Gila Cook in 1993. Gila Cook was a member of an archaeological team led by Israeli archaeologist Abraham Buran when he stumbled upon pieces of this centuries-old artifact. When the pieces were joined, the result was an ancient stone wall, and archaeologists had a hard time decrypting the message written on it. It contained several lines of Aramaic, which was closely related to Biblical Hebrew and historically a common language among the Jews. The inscription was first read and translated by the renowned epigrapher Joseph Nave. According to archaeologists, the inscription gives an account of how an individual killed Jehoram of Israel, the son of Ahab and king of the House of David. These inscriptions corroborate the information that can be found in passages of the Hebrew Bible. Also, when archaeologists viewed this inscription from a biblical point of view, they concluded that the stele was likely written and made by Hazael, king of Aram Damascus. This explains the Aramaic language that was found on the ancient stone. Although the discovery of the stele was made in Tel Dan, the ancient stone currently occupies a coveted spot at the Israel Museum. From what archaeologists and historians have pieced together so far, Hazael was an important regional figure during this moment when the stele was made. The stele could pass as one of Hazael's praise singers because it boasts of the ruler's victory over the king of Israel and his ally, the king of the House of David. The Aramaic king attributes his victory over his two southern neighbors to the divine guidance of his god Hadad. The stele paints a picture of how Hazael waged war against the kings of Israel and Judah, killing several thousands of their soldiers before personally finishing off both kings. It would interest you to know that the stele didn't explicitly state the names of the two kings. However, as soon as the story in the stele was decrypted, archaeologists began searching for a likely answer to the identity of the two kings. They have reason to believe that the kings in question are Jehoram of Israel and Ahaziah of Judah. Even though skeptics have a thing or two to say about this reference to David in the stele, it is hard to argue with the fact that the stone is strong evidence outside the Bible that indeed a King David lived on this earth several centuries ago. Skeptics can't ask us to ignore the fact that the stone mentioned the House of David in the Aramaic inscription. Therefore, it is a no-brainer that archaeologists nicknamed the ancient stone House of David. It is hard to look at this hard evidence and call it a ruse. After the Tel Dan stele and Mesha stele confirmed that King David was a genuine historical figure, archaeologists had a new dilemma on their hands, discovering the tomb of the ancient king. Although this new adventure was alluring for many archaeologists interested in Israel, they knew it wouldn't be an easy conquest. They needed no soothsayer to tell them they were embarking on a difficult expedition. The search for the tomb of King David is up there in the league of top adventures. The same as the search for the long-lost city of Atlantis. This difficulty was worsened by the fact that scholars haven't been able to reach a consensus on the nature and extent of his rule. Although biblical accounts give us a peek into the nature of his rule and that of his predecessor and successors, the information was not very helpful in determining the exact period his reign started or ended. Over the years, numerous hypotheses have emerged attempting to describe the nature and extent of King David's regime in ancient Israel, but none of them come close to what archaeologists had in mind. Since historians were unable to help archaeologists narrow their focus, the latter had to search far and wide in their bid to uncover this ancient tomb. Most scholars believe that the tomb of David is located somewhere on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. The search for the tomb has raged on for several centuries, with the earliest attempts being recorded in medieval times. In the 12th century, the Jewish traveler Benjamin of Tudela discovered a tomb that contained the remains of King David and his son Solomon on Mount Zion. The 17th century Kabbalist and alchemist Abraham Azulai wrote that he accessed David's tomb through an underground passageway in Hebron, which brought him to a cave where he saw the bones of David and Solomon. He claimed he was forced to leave the cave because of a powerful wind that overwhelmed him. Although these accounts by medieval writers support the narrative that the tomb is located in Jerusalem, none of these accounts were very useful to archaeologists. They had been burned one too many times to trust the report of these medieval travelers. Therefore, they had to conduct their search independently without relying on past information. They had learned their lessons from previous episodes of wild goose chases. For instance, in the 1890s, French archaeologist Raymond Weil began a search for David's tomb in the city of David, an archaeological site that contains the remains of ancient Jerusalem. In his bid to uncover the tomb, Weil excavated the city between 1913 and 1914. Unfortunately, the outcome of his efforts was not what he anticipated. Rather than find the remains of the ancient king, Weil found tombs of a different kind, the tombs of middle-class Israelites. Although it wasn't the outcome Weil and his team had in mind, they were nonetheless excited by their find, as it helped to broaden the knowledge about the city of David. Other archaeologists decided to try their luck with Mount Zion to see if they could unearth David's tomb. In 1913, a group of workers from a seminary college accidentally made an important discovery while renovating a room adjacent to a synagogue on Mount Zion. It happened that they stumbled on an underground passage. The college decided to invite a team of archaeologists led by Jacob Pinkerfeld to study this passageway. After an examination of the passageway, they uncovered 2 rooms filled with bones. Jacob and his team of archaeologists concluded that the bones were human remains from the 14th century. Although they hadn't found what they sought, they had discovered remains that could help them get a clearer picture of the events on Mount Zion. We know that the Jewish narrative teaches that King David's tomb is on Mount Zion, and this narrative has been passed down from generation to generation. However, it is important to note that the Jewish narrative isn't the only story that asserts this position. The Christian and Muslim narratives also claim that David's tomb is on Mount Zion. These narratives are derived from the biblical accounts, which state that David was buried in the city of David. However, it is important to note that, unlike the Jewish narrative, the Christian and Muslim narratives aren't as definitive about the location of the tomb. They claim that the tomb of David is on Mount Zion, but they also entertain the possibility of the tomb being located elsewhere. Despite their differing views on the exact location, all 3 narratives agree that David was buried in Jerusalem. It would interest you to know that the Christians and Muslims share another point of agreement. They both believe that the tomb of David contains the remains of his son Solomon, who ruled after him. The Christian narrative teaches that Solomon was buried alongside his father, while the Muslim narrative adds a twist. The Muslims believe that Solomon's body was magically transported to the tomb by his supernatural powers. Although archaeologists haven't been able to pinpoint the exact location of King David's tomb, their numerous discoveries give them renewed hope of unearthing it in the future. Even though they haven't found his tomb, they have found other important artifacts that give us insight into the life and reign of the ancient king. For instance, archaeologists discovered the Stepstone structure, a massive stone wall that dates back to the 10th century BC. The structure is located in the city of David and is believed to have been part of the city wall during the reign of King David. They also uncovered the large stone structure, a massive stone building in the city of David. The structure is believed to have been the palace of King David. It is important to note that archaeologists are still piecing together the evidence, and they haven't come to a consensus on whether the structure was indeed David's palace. Another important artifact discovered by archaeologists is the Ophel inscription, a ceramic jar fragment found in the Ophel area of Jerusalem. The inscription on the jar is in Hebrew and dates back to the 10th century BC. It is one of the oldest known examples of Hebrew writing. The artifact provides evidence of the use of Hebrew as a written language during the reign of King David. As archaeologists continue their search for David's tomb, we can't help but wonder what other exciting discoveries they will make along the way. The quest to uncover the tomb of this legendary king is far from over, and we can only hope that it will lead to more significant finds that will broaden our understanding of ancient Israel's history. The quest for King David's tomb is a testament to the enduring fascination with this legendary figure. Despite the challenges and uncertainties, the search continues, fueled by the hope of uncovering more evidence that will shed light on the life and reign of this remarkable king. The journey to discover David's tomb is a journey through history, filled with excitement, mystery,